In the previous movie, we explored how we could add a bit of motion blur. And here what I want to do is work on the same image, but this time add some radial blur. So let's go ahead and group our two blur layers here by clicking in one and then shift clicking in the other and pressing Command or Control G to group those, and then we'll name this motion. Next, what I want to do is I want to add a bit of an interesting effect. And the effect that I want to go for is this zoomed in kind of look, this radial blur. Well, to do that, we're going to do something completely different. Click in your background layer, then press Command or Control J to duplicate that, or simply click and drag this to the new layer icon. Next, we'll go ahead and name this radial. From here, what we're going to do is convert this so that we can apply a smart filter. One of the easiest ways to do that is to right-click or control-click and choose Convert to Smart Object. Once you do that, you'll see a new icon right here. Well, the reason I want to do this is so that I have more flexibility with the amount of blur that I'm adding. And you'll see what I mean here in a second. We'll go up to our Filter pull-down menu. Then we're going to choose Blur and then Radial Blur. Now with Radial Blur, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to position this and determine my overall amount so that this crosshair right here is going to target my guy. Well, what's tricky about this dialog is you notice this is a square and my image is a rectangle. So there's a lot of guesswork. I'm going to use Zoom and I'll use Good and then click OK. Now when I apply that, I actually got pretty lucky. I zoomed in right into this area. Yet if my accuracy wasn't quite so good, what you could do is double click the radial blur and then you could move this over just a bit and up and then click OK, and you can see now it's off over here. Double click again and then move this around until you get it exactly where you want it. You can also control the overall amount in order to lessen that a bit. And here you can see that by using a smart filter, it gives you a ton of flexibility. The other thing that's great about a smart filter is that we have this built-in mask. Simply click in the mask, grab our brush tool, and then we'll go ahead and paint with black. And in this case, I'm simply going to paint with black to bring back some of the guy here and also some of the edges around the guy because I want him to come into this image a little bit more strongly. Then I'll press the 4 key. That'll take my opacity to 40% or simply lower this down. And with a little bit of a bigger brush, I'm just going to paint away some of this zoom in a few of these areas. Again, just kind of adding a bit of style and difference to this overall effect so it's not quite so uniform. And sometimes I find in this way you can add even more drama by kind of interrupting this pattern so that this zoom has a different look and overall feel. Well, in this case, we have this interesting aesthetic. Take a look at it. Here's the before and then the after. Now, one of the problems here for me is that I masked off too much content. Well, I can fix that really easily. You can do so by grabbing your brush. Make sure you target the mask, and then just paint with white. And here I'll paint with white with a little higher opacity. I just want to bring back a bit more. I realize I just painted out a little bit too much. And the nice thing about using a smart filter is you have that added flexibility. Alright, well, one of the things I like to do with my smart filters is eventually to close or collapse this menu here. We can do so by clicking on this icon. And now we can look at our before and then after. And the nice thing about this document is we now have two different types of blur. We can see what radial blur looks like, and then we can also compare that to motion blur. And again, this can be informative. It can help us think about how we want to create photographs. And the great thing about trying to accomplish motion with these techniques is that if ever we come to a point where we say, you know what, I don't like the motion, no big deal. Simply turn off the layer visibility icon and you can go back to the original image. So in summary, when you're creating motion, typically it's a good idea to create a new layer. And then if you want added extra flexibility, convert that layer to a smart filter. In other situations, what you might want to do is simply create different layers. One which has blur, one which has some nice detail or sharpness in it. You can then combine those together in order to come up with the best results. Most importantly, when working with blur, use a technique that gives you flexibility so that if at any point you don't like what you've done, you can always undo that simply by clicking on the eye icon. Alright, well that wraps up our work with this photograph.